The rain pounded the streets of Manhattan's Upper East Side on an August night that seemed endless. Madison Carter could barely see through the tears that mixed with the cold drops running down her face. Her bare feet touched the cold asphalt, and each step was torture. The stitches from her C-section, performed just 3 days earlier, felt like they were tearing her skin with every movement. In her arms, wrapped in already soaked blankets, her twin babies, Liam and Luna, cried desperately, feeling the cold and the insecurity of the absurd situation. Madison glanced back one last time. The 3-story townhouse, with its illuminated windows and impeccable gardens, seemed to mock her. At the main entrance, she could still see the silhouette of Ryan, her husband, next to the 2 security guards he had hired specifically for this moment. The white nightgown she wore, now transparent from the rain, was all she had besides the babies and a small suitcase she dragged with difficulty. 3 hours earlier, everything had seemed fine. Madison had just finished nursing the twins when Ryan entered the bedroom with an expression she had never seen before. Absolute coldness. He didn't yell, didn't raise his voice. He simply said the marriage was over and that she needed to leave immediately. Madison, still weak from childbirth, tried to argue, tried to understand what was happening. That's when he uttered the words that completely shattered her. "You've always been dead weight, Madison. I married you out of pity. A poor girl from a small town in Ohio, no family, nothing to her name. I thought I could mold you, turn you into something useful. But you never stopped being that scared little girl who showed up here 5 years ago." Madison remembered perfectly how she had met Ryan. She was working as a receptionist at a luxury hotel in Columbus, trying to save money for her business degree. Ryan was staying there for a business conference. He was kind, attentive, interested in her story. He told her about his own challenges, about how he had built an import-export company from scratch. For 6 months they kept in touch long distance. When Ryan asked her to move to New York to be with him, Madison saw it as a chance for a new life. A year later, they were married. The first few years were good, or at least that's what Madison believed. Ryan traveled a lot for work, but always came back with gifts and stories. The townhouse on the Upper East Side was stunning, bigger than any place Madison had ever lived. She had housekeepers, a driver, credit cards with no limit. But there was something that always bothered her. Ryan never truly included her in his life. She didn't know his business associates, didn't participate in company decisions, had no access to the bank accounts beyond her personal use card. When she questioned him, he said he was protecting her, that women didn't need to worry about such things. The pregnancy changed everything. Ryan became distant, irritable. He complained about Madison's body, the morning sickness, the doctor's appointments. After the twins were born, he barely looked at them. Madison attributed it all to work stress, to the debts he mentioned from time to time. She never imagined this night would come. The final humiliation came when Jessica appeared at the door. Jessica Collins, Ryan's executive assistant, a tall woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, wearing a turquoise silk robe. Madison recognized that robe immediately. It had been a gift from Ryan the previous Christmas, wrapped in gold, paper with a red bow. Madison had only worn it twice before the pregnancy, back when she could still fit into it. "What a shame, Madison. Truly a shame," Jessica said, with a smile that didn't hide her satisfaction. "But you understand, don't you? Ryan needs a woman who's his equal, someone who understands the business world, who can be a true partner. You were always just a little doll to show off." Madison wanted to scream, to rip that robe off the woman's body, to fight. But her arms were busy holding her children and her strength was gone. The security guards were already grabbing her suitcase, throwing it down the front steps. Ryan lit a cigar, the same kind he smoked for special celebrations, and waved his hand, as if dismissing an incompetent employee. "Oh, and Madison? Don't try anything stupid. All the assets are in my name, the house, the cars, the accounts. You're flat broke. If you try to sue me, I'll prove you're an unstable mother, and I'll get the kids too. Better accept your situation and disappear from my life." And so Madison found herself walking down Park Avenue at 11 o'clock at night, shoeless, penniless, with 2 newborns in her arms. The rain had scared away pedestrians, and the few cars that passed didn't even slow down. She didn't know where to go. She had no friends in New York. Ryan had always discouraged her friendships, saying people just wanted to take advantage of her position. Her mother had left when she was 15, and she never knew any other relatives. Her father, Walter Carter, had passed away 8 years ago when she was only 19. He had been her only real family. Walter had worked as a warehouse manager in Columbus. Simple man of few words, but he always made sure Madison had everything she needed. He raised her alone after Madison's mother abandoned them. Walter never complained, never made Madison feel like a burden. When she met Ryan, her father seemed suspicious, but said nothing. At the time, Madison thought he was just being overprotective. Now, walking in the rain, she wished she had listened to her father's silences. Madison's phone vibrated in the pocket of her soaked nightgown. She stopped under the awning of a closed bakery, and with difficulty managed to pull it out without dropping the babies. It was a text from an unknown number with a Columbus area code. The message was short and unsettling. "Madison, don't trust anyone. Watch the attached video now. Everything you need to know is here. Your father always protected you, even after he was gone." With trembling hands, Madison opened the video file. The phone screen illuminated her wet face, and she almost dropped it when she saw the image. It was her father, Walter Carter, sitting in an office chair, wearing a light blue dress shirt, with the same graying mustache she remembered. The video was dated 8 years ago, just a few days before he passed away. "My dear Madison, if you're watching this, it means the worst has happened. Ryan has shown his true colors. I always knew this day might come," Walter began, his voice firm but heavy with sadness. "I need to tell you the truth about me, about my life, and about what I've prepared to protect you." Madison leaned against the cold wall of the bakery, her tears now falling for different reasons. Her father's voice, which she hadn't heard in so long, felt like an impossible hug in that moment of absolute despair. "I was never just a warehouse manager, Madison. That was my cover, my disguise. In reality, I worked for 30 years as an asset protection specialist for very wealthy families. My job was to create complex legal structures, secret trust funds, to protect fortunes from greedy people and predatory marriages. When you met Ryan, I did a full background check on him. I found a lot of things, honey, a lot of bad things." Madison held her breath. The twins had stopped crying and were now sleeping exhausted, protected by their mother's body heat. "Ryan didn't build any company from scratch. He's a first-class opportunist. He's had 3 previous relationships, always with women from wealthy families. He'd gain access to their finances, embezzle funds, and then abandon them with debts and lawsuits. He's very smart, always covers his tracks. But I'm better," Walter continued, with a half-smile Madison knew well. "So I set a trap, Madison. A perfect trap." The video paused for a moment, and Madison realized her father had split the recording into parts. She looked around. She needed to get out of there, needed a safe place to watch the rest. That's when she remembered Mrs. Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez lived in an old pre-war building 3 blocks from the mansion. She was a 72-year-old woman Madison had met at the market months before her pregnancy. They had chatted about spices, family recipes, and discovered they both had roots outside the city. Since then, Madison had visited Mrs. Rodriguez weekly, bringing cakes and listening to stories from a time when New York was different. Ryan never knew about these visits. He was always too busy to ask what Madison did during the day. Madison walked to the building, grateful it was so close. When she buzzed the intercom, it was almost midnight. Mrs. Rodriguez answered sleepily, but upon recognizing Madison's voice, she immediately buzzed her in without asking questions. When she saw the young woman's state, soaked and with babies in her arms, Mrs. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. "Get in here, child, get in before you catch pneumonia," she said, already grabbing towels and preparing hot tea. Madison entered the small but cozy apartment. The walls were covered with old photos. The sofa was draped with a crochet blanket, and the smell of fresh coffee still lingered in the air. Mrs. Rodriguez carefully took the twins, checked if they were okay, and placed them in an improvised bassinet made of soft blankets. Then she turned to Madison, with that maternal look that only women of her generation could have. "Tell me everything, honey. Don't leave anything out," Madison told her. Every word from Ryan, every humiliation, every second of that terrible night. Mrs. Rodriguez listened in silence, her expression growing more serious by the minute. When Madison finished, the old woman stood up, went to an antique cabinet and came back with a rosary in her hands. "That man will pay for what he did. You can be sure of that," Mrs. Rodriguez said with impressive determination. "But right now you need to rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. You and the children can stay here as long as you need." Madison took a shower, put on a borrowed nightgown from Mrs. Rodriguez that smelled of lavender, and finally had time to watch the rest of her father's video. Sitting on the guest room bed, with the twins sleeping beside her, she pressed play again. Walter's image reappeared on the screen. He was now holding some papers, documents he leafed through as he spoke. "Madison, everything. Ryan thinks he owns actually belongs to you. The townhouse, the bank accounts, the companies, the investments, everything. When he married you, I had already set up a complex legal structure. I created a trust fund in the name of an offshore company based in the Cayman Islands. That company owns another company in Uruguay, which in turn owns a U.S. holding company, and the sole beneficial owner of this entire chain is you, my daughter." Madison was speechless. It made no sense. How was that possible? Ryan always said everything was in his name, that he had built that. Fortune himself. "Ryan received forged documents when you got married," Walter explained, as if reading his daughter's mind. "He believes he's the legal owner of everything, but the real documents, registered and notarized, are somewhere else. He's just a temporary manager, an administrator with no real power. And the best part, Madison, is the clause I included." Walter leaned forward, his eyes shining with a mix of sadness and satisfaction. "If he ever kicks you out of the house, if he abandons you and your children, if he shows his true colors, the entire estate automatically reverts to your name. Immediately. No red tape, no chance of appeal. Getting kicked out tonight activated that clause. You just need to find Helen Miller. She's a lawyer, my partner for years in asset protection cases. She has all the original documents, all the proof. Her office is on Madison Avenue, number 1842, suite 1505. Madison paused the video. Her hands were shaking. Was this real? Could it possibly be true? A part of her wanted desperately to believe, but another part was afraid it was just a cruel dream, an illusion born of despair. Walter continued in the video, his voice now softer, more emotional. "I know you must be scared, confused, maybe even doubting if this is real, but it is, honey. Every word I'm saying is absolutely true. I spent 15 years preparing this, ever since you were 4 years old and your mother left us. I knew I had to make sure you would never be at anyone's mercy, that you would never go through what I saw so many other women go through in my work. Smart, good women, destroyed by men who only wanted their money." A tear rolled down Madison's cheek. Her father had done all of this for her. For all those years she thought he was just a simple manager. He was actually building an invisible fortress around her. "There's one more thing you need to know," Walter said, his expression growing even more serious. "Ryan doesn't know it, but I found out he was already embezzling money from the company accounts. Thinking it was his, he started transferring funds to overseas accounts to hide it from you in a potential separation. But since the money wasn't his to begin with, that's technically embezzlement. Helen has all the proof, all the transfer records. If he tries to fight, you have more than enough ammunition to destroy him." The video showed Walter getting up, walking to a window. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, illuminating his tired face. "Madison, I know I won't be here to see you use the protection I built. My health isn't good, and I know my days are numbered. But I want you to know that every second I spent planning this was worth it. You are my greatest achievement, my daughter. Not the money I saved, not the structures I created, but you, the strong, smart, and kind woman you've become. And now you're going to show this Ryan who you really are. Don't let him diminish you. Don't let him make you believe you're less than you truly are. I love you, honey. Always have, and always will." The video ended. The screen went black. Madison hugged the phone to her chest and cried silently so as not to wake the babies. She cried for her father's passing, for the pain of Ryan's betrayal, for the relief of knowing she wasn't completely helpless. She cried until she had no tears left. The next morning, Mrs. Rodriguez prepared a hearty breakfast. Warm bagels with cream cheese, freshly brewed coffee, and a slice of homemade coffee cake. Madison ate like she hadn't in weeks. The twins nursed and fell back asleep, oblivious to the drama surrounding their little lives. "Are you going to see that lawyer today?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked as she washed the dishes. "I am. I need to know if it's all true," Madison replied, already feeling stronger. Mrs. Rodriguez dried her hands and sat down next to Madison. "Let me tell you something, child. I had a marriage a bit like yours. My first husband was just like your Ryan. Handsome, charming, a liar. When I found out who he really was, I had nothing. No protection, no lawyer, no money saved. It took me years to get back on my feet. That's why when you told me everything last night, my heart ached. But now, knowing your father protected you like this, I'm sure you're going to make it. You won't go through what I went through." Madison hugged the older woman, feeling for the first time since being kicked out that maybe, just maybe, things could turn out okay. At 10 in the morning, Madison was standing in front of the office building on Madison Avenue. It was a modern skyscraper, all mirrored glass with an imposing lobby. She was wearing clothes borrowed from Mrs. Rodriguez, which were a bit loose but presentable. The twins were in a double stroller that the neighbor had also lent her, an older but functional model. Suite 1505 had a discreet plaque on the door. Helen Miller, Corporate and Asset Law. Madison took a deep breath and rang the bell. A young secretary answered, and upon hearing the name Madison Carter, her eyes widened. "Ms. Miller is expecting you," the young woman said, with a reverence Madison didn't understand. "Please come in." The office was elegant but sober, walls lined with law books, a few abstract paintings, a massive mahogany desk. And behind that desk was Helen Miller, a woman of about 50, with black hair tied in a flawless bun, wearing a grey pantsuit and red-framed glasses. She stood up as soon as Madison entered and walked toward her with a warm smile. "Madison, finally. Your father made me promise I would take care of you if this day ever came. I honor my promises." Helen Miller picked up, the twins with surprising familiarity, making funny faces that made Liam giggle. She gestured for Madison to sit in a comfortable armchair and asked her secretary to bring water and cookies. "Your father was one of the most brilliant men I've ever known," Helen began, still holding Luna. "We worked together on dozens of cases over 20 years. He had a unique ability to predict behavior, to understand human nature. When he came to me 15 years ago and said he needed to create a protection plan for his daughter, I didn't ask questions, I simply trusted him." Madison took a sip of water, still processing it all. "So it's true, everything he said in the video is true?" Helen smiled and walked to a safe built into the wall. She entered a long combination and pulled out a thick folder, full of documents. "Every word. The structure your father created is absolutely solid, impenetrable. Ryan Anderson believed for 5 years that he was the owner of an empire. In reality, he doesn't even own the rug in the living room. Everything, absolutely everything, belongs to the trust fund of which you are the sole beneficiary." Madison began to leaf through the documents. There were dozens of pages in English and Spanish. Contracts, deeds, certificates, property records. Every page confirmed what her father had said. How did he manage to fool Ryan for so long? Helen sat in the chair next to Madison, handing the babies back to her. "Your father was a master at creating parallel documents. When Ryan married you, he received a set of documents that looked absolutely legitimate. Purchase agreements for the townhouse, company registrations, bank statements. All perfectly forged but with the appearance of authenticity. These documents showed Ryan as the legal owner of everything. And because he never suspected anything, he never bothered to verify them with the official agencies. He just believed it." "And how did my father manage all this without anyone noticing?" "Your father used the money he earned over 30 years working for millionaire families. He invested in legitimate offshore companies, created layers of legal protection, bought properties through trusted proxies. When Ryan came into your life, your father bought the Upper East Side townhouse in the holding company's name. Then he gave Ryan fake documents saying he was the buyer. Ryan paid a symbolic down payment, thinking he was financing the property. In reality, he was just paying rent without knowing it. Madison was stunned. The complexity of it all was breathtaking. And the import-export companies, do they exist? They exist, but they don't belong to him. The companies were created by your father as legal structures. Ryan was hired as a manager, receiving a generous salary, but with no real ownership. The company profits went straight to the trust fund. Ryan thought he was building an empire, when in fact he was just managing someone else's assets. Helen opened another folder, this one with recent bank statements. And here's the best part. Ryan has been embezzling funds from the companies for 2 years. He opened accounts in Panama and the Bahamas, transferring money monthly. Since he thinks he owns the companies, he believes he's just moving his own money. But since he's not the owner, this constitutes embezzlement. I have all the transfer records, all the documented proof. So he can be prosecuted? He can. And if he tries to fight for custody of the children or for the assets, I'll use this against him. He'll back down immediately, because the alternative is facing criminal charges. Madison felt a wave of relief mixed with anger. Anger at being deceived, anger at believing in Ryan, anger at wasting 5 years of her life on that man. But she also felt something new, power. For the first time since being kicked out, she felt she had control over her own life. "What do we do now?" Madison asked. Helen closed the folders and leaned back in her chair, with the expression of someone about to detail a battle plan. "Now, we let Ryan believe he's won. For a few weeks, he'll enjoy life with Jessica, thinking he's free of you, thinking his empire is secure. Meanwhile, we'll prepare all the documentation to reclaim the assets and for the child custody case. When we're ready, we strike all at once, fast, surgical, and definitive. And where will I stay during these weeks?" Your father left an apartment prepared for this situation. It's in Brooklyn Heights in a discreet building. It has 2 bedrooms, it's furnished, and the bills are paid for a year. You and the children will stay there in complete comfort and safety while we prepare for your triumphant return. Madison took a deep breath. It all felt like a movie, too unreal to be true, but the documents were there, solid and indisputable. "My dad really thought of everything, didn't he?" Helen smiled warmly. "Walter once told me that you were the reason he woke up every day, that after his wife left, you became the center of his universe. He lived to ensure you would never have to depend on anyone's kindness, that you would never be at the mercy of a man like Ryan. And he succeeded, Madison. He managed to protect you even after he was gone. The following weeks were intense." Madison settled into the apartment in Brooklyn Heights, a cozy space with a balcony and lots of natural light. Mrs. Rodriguez visited daily, helping with the twins and bringing home-cooked meals. Helen came 3 times a week with updates on the legal preparations. Madison discovered that Ryan had quickly changed his relationship status on social media to be with Jessica. They posted photos at the townhouse, dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips to the Hamptons. Jessica wore the jewelry Ryan had given Madison, drove the car Madison had chosen, slept in the bed Madison had shared with him. Each photo was a stab in the heart. But Helen always advised her to save that pain, to turn it into fuel for what was to come. "He's digging his own grave," Helen would say. "Every excessive expense, every trip, every expensive gift for Jessica is being documented. When we get to court, we'll present a picture of an irresponsible, wasteful man who abandoned his newborn children to live a life of excess." Madison also learned more about her father through Helen. Walter Carter had been a respected figure in the discreet legal world of asset protection. He had saved fortunes, protected inheritances, shielded families from con artists. But he never wanted fame or recognition. He lived modestly, saving every penny for Madison's fund. The townhouse on the Upper East Side had been his last major project. 2 years before he passed, Walter used his savings and contacts to buy the property for a below-market price from a businessman in financial trouble. Then he set up the entire legal structure, waiting for the right moment. When Madison met Ryan, Walter saw the perfect opportunity. He investigated the young man, discovered his past full of predatory relationships, and decided to use him as a pawn on the board. He offered Ryan the chance to live in a mansion, manage companies, and have a luxurious lifestyle. Ryan took the bait without hesitation. For 5 years, he lived thinking he was fooling Madison, when in fact, he was the one being used. 3 weeks after she was kicked out, everything was ready. Helen scheduled the repossession of the townhouse for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. She chose the time deliberately, knowing Ryan would be home because he had meetings with his accountants on Tuesdays, meetings that took place in the townhouse's home office. Madison was nervous that morning. She wore a navy blue suit Helen had bought for her, tied her hair in a sleek ponytail, and put on a red lipstick that Mrs. Rodriguez insisted she wear for good luck. The twins stayed with the neighbor, who promised to care for them as if they were her own grandchildren. On the way to the Upper East Side, Helen went over the final details. The court officer is already on his way, the police too, just as a precaution in case Ryan tries anything stupid. You have all the original documents, all the proof. When he opens the door, you don't need to scream, you don't need to curse. Just be firm, be dignified, and show him that the power was always yours. The car parked in front of the townhouse. Madison felt a tightness in her chest seeing the house again, but she quickly composed herself. Helen rang the doorbell. It was Jessica who answered, wearing a yellow sundress and an expression of surprise that quickly turned to contempt. "What do you want here?" "Came to beg to come back," Jessica said, laughing. Madison didn't answer. She just waited for the court officer, a tall man in an impeccable uniform, to step forward. "Ms. Jessica Collins and Mr. Ryan Anderson, I have an immediate eviction order issued by the New York Civil Court. You have 2 hours to vacate this property with your personal belongings." Jessica turned pale. Ryan came running from the living room wearing only shorts and an open shirt, his hair disheveled. "What kind of joke is this?" he yelled, snatching the papers from the officer's hand. "This house is mine. I have the deeds. I have everything registered." Helen stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "The documents you possess, Mr. Anderson, are forgeries. Very well made, I must admit, but forgeries. The real documents, registered with the county clerk, recognized by the IRS and the Federal Reserve, are right here, and they prove that this property belongs to a trust fund whose sole beneficiary is Madison Carter. It always has. You've never owned a thing." Ryan began to flip through the papers the officer had handed him. Madison watched his expression change as he read. First disbelief, then confusion, finally panic. "This isn't possible. This is some kind of fraud. I'll sue you. "You can try," Helen interrupted, opening her own briefcase. "But before you do, you might want to see this." She held out a series of bank statements. Ryan took the pages with trembling hands. "These are the transfers you made to accounts in Panama and the Bahamas over the last 2 years. In total, they amount to $8.4 million. Since this money belonged to the trust, not you, these transfers constitute embezzlement, a felony that could land you in prison for up to 12 years. Jessica let out a sharp cry and backed away from Ryan as if he were on fire. "You told me that money was yours. You told me you were a successful businessman." Ryan ignored her, his eyes fixed on Helen. "What do you want? Money? Is that it? How much do you want to make this go away?" Helen laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. "I don't want anything, Mr. Anderson. My client Madison is willing to offer a deal. You leave now, quietly, without making a scene. You relinquish any claim to the assets. In return, she won't press criminal charges for embezzlement. You walk away free with no criminal record, able to start your life. Over. The alternative is you try to fight, and then we will use the full force of the law against you." Ryan looked at Madison for the first time since the door had opened. She held his gaze, without flinching, without showing fear. She was no longer the scared woman he had thrown out into the rain. She was someone completely different. "You planned all this," Ryan said, his voice filled with hatred. "You and that damn father of yours, you set me up." Madison finally spoke, her voice firm and clear. "No, Ryan, my father protected me. He knew exactly what kind of man you were. And you proved him right. You threw out a woman who just had surgery with 2 newborn babies in the middle of a storm. You don't deserve mercy, but you're getting a chance. Take it." Ryan crumpled the papers in his hands. For a moment, Madison thought he was going to do something violent, but then he threw the papers on the floor and ran up the stairs, screaming profanities. Jessica ran after him, crying. 2 hours later, Ryan and Jessica left the townhouse with 4 large suitcases. Ryan didn't look at Madison. He simply got into his car, a black BMW he had bought with the embezzled money, and sped off. Jessica followed in her own car, still crying. The court officer handed the keys to Madison. "The house is yours, ma'am. Good luck." Madison slowly entered the townhouse. Everything was exactly as she remembered, but at the same time it felt completely different. The walls that once seemed elegant now just looked empty. The expensive furniture had lost its shine. She went up to the master bedroom, where she had spent 5 years sleeping next to Ryan, and felt only relief that she would never have to do that again. Helen placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing. Now let's take care of part 2. Custody of the children." Madison turned to the lawyer. "Do you think he'll try to take the twins?" "I'm sure of it. Not because he loves the children, but because he'll realize they're the only leverage he has left against you. He'll try to use Liam and Luna as bargaining chips to get money, but we'll be ready." The following days were about getting organized. Madison brought the twins back to the townhouse, now truly their home. Mrs. Rodriguez accepted Madison's invitation to live in a separate suite, helping with the children and keeping her company. The house, once cold and impersonal, began to come to life. Madison put up photos of her father, placed plants in the windows, and filled the living room with colorful toys. Exactly 1 week after Ryan's eviction, Helen called. "He's filed for joint custody, just as we expected." Madison felt a knot in her stomach. Now what? "Now we execute phase 2 of the plan. You're going to invite him to dinner here at the townhouse. You'll say you want to talk civilly about the children's future. He'll accept because he'll think it's an opportunity to manipulate you. But we'll be ready." Madison didn't fully understand, but she trusted Helen. She sent a text to Ryan that afternoon. "Ryan, we need to talk about Liam and Luna. No lawyers, no fighting. Just the 2 of us, like responsible adults. Dinner tomorrow at 8 at the townhouse." The reply came 20 minutes later. "I'll be there." Helen arrived the next morning with a security equipment technician. They installed tiny cameras in the dining room, hidden microphones in the flower arrangements, and recorders under the table. All invisible, all perfectly legal since it was in Madison's own residence. "The plan is simple," Helen explained. "You offer him wine, let him feel comfortable, superior. Start talking about the possibility of a financial settlement. He'll get excited, let his guard down, and say what he really thinks about the children, and we'll have it all on tape." Madison was nervous that night. She wore a simple black dress, tied her hair back, and prepared a full dinner: grilled salmon, mushroom risotto, a very expensive bottle of red wine from Ryan's own cellar. When he arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, wearing a grey suit and exuding expensive cologne, Madison could almost pretend they were just 2 ex-spouses trying to solve problems civilly. "The house looks nice," Ryan said, looking around with an expression Madison couldn't decipher. "You've changed a few things." "I've made it a real home," Madison replied, pouring him some wine. "Something it never was when you were here." Ryan took a generous sip of wine. "Look, Madison, I know things ended badly between us, but we have 2 children. We need to think about them." Madison sat down, pretending to consider his words. "I agree. That's why I invited you here. I want to make a deal." Ryan's eyes lit up. It was exactly the opening he had been waiting for. "What kind of deal?" Madison took a deep breath, remembering Helen's instructions. She had to make him feel in control. "I know you need resources to start over, and I have access to the fund my father left. Maybe we can come to a number that works for both of us. You give up joint custody, accept a visitation schedule, and I'll make a one-time final transfer to you. After that, we each go our own way." Ryan leaned back in his chair, smiling. It was the smile of a gambler who thought he was about to win a bet. "Depends on the amount," Madison pretended to think. I need to know one thing first. Do you really want to be in their lives? Or is this just about the money? Ryan laughed. It was a cruel, familiar laugh. Madison, please, let's be honest here. I never wanted kids. They were your idea, remember? You were the one who insisted on getting pregnant. I only agreed because I thought it would tie me even more to the trust fund money. Madison forced a neutral expression, but inside she was recording his every word. So the children mean nothing to you? Ryan drank more wine, now visibly more relaxed. They're assets, Madison, bargaining chips. I filed for custody because I knew you'd panic, and look, it worked. You called me here offering money. That's what the kids are for, to make you open your wallet. And if I give you the money, will you really get out of our lives? Ryan leaned forward, his eyes cold. I will. But it won't be cheap. I want 10 million. In return, I'll sign a document relinquishing any claim to the twins. You get your precious little kids, I get enough money to live well. Everybody wins. Madison stood up, went to the sideboard, and returned with a folder. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. She opened the folder and took out a tablet. On the screen was the video of their conversation, perfectly recorded. Ryan calling his children assets, admitting he didn't want them, confessing he was using custody as a form of extortion. Ryan turned white. You recorded me. Madison smiled for the first time since he had arrived. It was a smile of absolute victory. I did. And this is going straight to the judge who will decide on custody. Do you think you have any chance now? Ryan shot up, knocking over his chair. His expression shifted between rage and terror. You can't use that. I didn't authorize this recording. It's illegal. Helen Miller walked out of the kitchen, where she had been listening to everything. She was holding another folder, ever impeccable in her grey suit. Actually, Mr. Anderson, it's perfectly legal. We are in Ms. Carter's residence. She is the rightful owner. She has every right to install security devices in her own home, and you were aware that anything you said could be used. After all, you yourself said you wanted to discuss the children's future. We consider that implied consent. Ryan pointed a trembling finger at Helen. You're a snake. Both of you are snakes. Helen smiled coldly. No, Mr. Anderson. We're just women who refuse to be manipulated. Now, you have two options. First, you accept supervised visitation, undergo a psychological evaluation and parenting classes, and try to build a healthy relationship with your children. Second, you take this to court, and this recording will be presented as evidence that you see your children only as tools for extortion. What will the judge decide? I think we both know the answer. Ryan grabbed the jacket he had left on the sofa. His movements were jerky, uncontrolled. You haven't won. This isn't over. He slammed the door on his way out. Madison heard his car screech away, tires squealing on the asphalt. She sat down again, her legs trembling from the adrenaline. You did very well, Helen said, placing a hand on her shoulder. I know it was difficult, but now we have exactly what we needed. The court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Madison was at the courthouse at 9 in the morning, wearing a conservative navy blue suit, her hair pulled back, looking every bit the responsible, serious mother. Helen was by her side, accompanied by 2 associate attorneys carrying bulky briefcases. Ryan arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a wrinkled black suit and accompanied by a lawyer who looked like he'd been hired in a hurry. He avoided looking at Madison. The judge was Margaret Foster, a woman in her early 50s known for her strict demeanor and impatience with legal games. She examined the case file in silence for a few minutes, the only sound in the room the turning of pages. Very well, she finally began, taking off her glasses and looking directly at Ryan. Mr. Ryan Anderson, you are requesting joint custody of the twins Liam and Luna Carter Anderson. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Ryan replied, trying to sound confident. And can you tell me why you believe you are entitled to this custody, considering you threw the children's mother out of the house 3 days after? A C-section, in the middle of a storm without any support or resources? Ryan's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client was going through a period of emotional distress. He acknowledges that he acted impulsively and is remorseful. But that doesn't change the fact that he is the children's father and has a legal right to participate in their upbringing. The judge looked at Helen. Ms. Miller, Does the defense wish to respond? Helen stood up calmly, picking up a tablet. Your Honor, I would like to present some evidence that I believe is relevant to this decision. Over the next 40 minutes, Helen presented everything. The structure of the trust fund created by Walter Carter, the documents proving Ryan never owned anything, the history of illegal transfers to overseas accounts, testimony from the neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, about the state Madison arrived in on that stormy night, medical photos showing the still fresh C-section stitches, and finally, the dinner recording. Ryan's voice filled the courtroom, clear and undeniable. Their assets, Madison, bargaining chips. I filed for custody because I knew you'd panic. That's what the kids are for, to make you open your wallet. The silence that followed was absolute. The judge had a barely concealed expression of disgust. Ryan's own lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Honor, I can explain, Ryan began, his voice faltering. I was nervous. I had too much to drink. That's not what I really thought. The judge held up her hand, silencing him. Mr. Anderson, in my 23 years on the bench, I have seen many parents who were not prepared for parenthood. I have seen men who made mistakes out of immaturity. But never, ever, have I seen someone refer to their own children as financial assets. Bargaining chips. Those were your words. I don't need to hear anything else. She picked up a pen and began writing her ruling. I grant full and irrevocable custody to the mother, Madison Carter. The father will be entitled to supervised visitation, once a month, for 2 hours, at a location determined by the court. Furthermore, I order Mr. Anderson to undergo psychological counseling and a responsible parenting course, under penalty of losing even his visitation rights. Court costs and the opposing party's legal fees will be borne by the petitioner. It is so ordered. Next case. Ryan sat there, motionless, processing what had just happened. Madison felt a wave of relief so intense she almost collapsed. Helen held her arm, keeping her steady. Congratulations, the lawyer whispered. You won. The following weeks were about adjustment. Madison completely transformed the townhouse. She hired a decorator who brought in warm colors, cozy textures, and life to spaces that were once merely luxurious. The twins' room got wallpaper with clouds and stars, new cribs, a comfortable nursing chair. Ryan's office was converted into a playroom. Mrs. Rodriguez became much more than a helper. She was the grandmother the twins never had. She sang old lullabies while preparing baby food, told stories before bedtime, and taught Madison recipes passed down through generations. Ryan tried to appeal the decision twice. The first time, he claimed the recording was illegal and that he was under the influence of alcohol. The appellate judge didn't even want to hear the arguments upholding the ruling. On the second attempt, 3 months later, Ryan showed up with a private psychologist who claimed he had changed, was in therapy, and deserved a second chance. But when the judge asked about child support, Ryan began arguing that he shouldn't have to pay anything since he didn't have custody. The sham was obvious to everyone. Meanwhile, Madison began to explore the house more deeply. The office that had been her father's, a small room on the second floor she had always seen as just a storage space, caught her attention. She decided to organize everything, to catalogue Walter's belongings with care. It was while going through old boxes that she found it, a small safe installed inside a false cabinet. The combination was in a letter left in one of the drawers. With trembling hands, Madison opened the safe. Inside was another letter, more documents, and a flash drive. Madison took everything to her room, put the twins to bed, and began to read. My dear Madison, if you are reading this, then everything went as I planned. You are safe, the twins are protected, and Ryan is out of your life. I am proud of you, my daughter. I know it wasn't easy. I know you suffered. But you survived. And more than that, you won. Madison's tears began to fall before she even finished the first paragraph. Now I need to tell you about the second part of my plan. The trust fund I created is worth far more than what's needed to keep you and your children comfortable for the rest of your lives. I made sure of that. But the money wasn't saved just for you. It was saved so that you could help other women. Madison kept reading, increasingly surprised. During my career, I saw dozens of women financially and emotionally destroyed by men like Ryan. Smart, capable women who were manipulated, isolated, and left with nothing. And most of the time, there was nothing I could do besides protect the money. But there was no emotional, psychological, or strategic support structure. These women were left alone, having to start from scratch. The letter continued, detailing Walter's complete plan. Attached to this letter are the incorporation documents for the Walter Carter Foundation for Women in Crisis. It's already registered, has an IAN, and is funded for the next 10 years. It's just missing a director. And that director, my daughter, is you. Use your experience, use your story, use the resources I left to make a difference in the lives of other women. Don't let the suffering you went through be in vain. Transform it into strength to help those who are still suffering. Madison had to stop reading. The tears were falling so fast she could barely see the words. Her father, even after he was gone, even without being there to see it, was still taking care of her, still teaching her, still guiding her. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop. On it was a complete presentation about the foundation, detailed budgets, operational strategies, partnerships with law firms, psychologists, social workers. Walter had thought of everything, absolutely everything. The next morning, Madison called Helen. "I need your help with one more thing," Madison said. "My father left a foundation to help women like me, and I want to get it up and running." Helen arrived at the townhouse 2 hours later, accompanied by 2 of her partners. They gathered in the dining room, now a bright and welcoming space, and Madison presented all the documents her father had left. "This is extraordinary," Helen said, leafing through the papers with admiration. "Walter really thought of every detail. The legal structure is impeccable, the funding is solid, the partnerships are already mapped out. All that's left is to make it operational." "And how long would that take?" Madison asked. Helen looked at her partners, who exchanged a few words in a low voice. "With full dedication, 3 months to have the headquarters running, the teams hired, and the first cases underway." Madison took a deep breath. "Then, let's make it happen." The next 3 months were intense. Madison divided her time between caring for the twins, who were now 6 months old, and starting to recognize voices and faces, and structuring the foundation. Helen recommended an experienced administrator, Carla Fisher, who had worked in non-profits for 15 years. Together, they turned Walter's plans into reality. The headquarters of the Walter Carter Foundation was set up in an office building in Greenwich Village, near the subway for easy access. It spanned 4 floors, each with a specific function. The ground floor housed reception and initial intake. The first floor, a legal team with 5 lawyers specializing in family and asset law. The second floor, psychologists, social workers, and therapists. The third floor, vocational training courses, financial autonomy workshops, and meeting rooms. The Foundation's mission was revolutionary. It wasn't just about offering free legal aid, although that was crucial. The idea was to give women a complete toolkit to rebuild their lives, psychological support to deal with trauma, professional training to ensure financial independence, aggressive legal strategy to protect assets and secure rights, and perhaps most importantly, a mutual support network where women who had already been through the process helped those who were just starting. Madison gave her first interview about the foundation to a local newspaper 6 months after its launch. The reporter, a young woman with curly hair and attentive eyes, wanted to know the story behind the project. "My father dedicated his life to protecting people," Madison began, choosing her words carefully. "When he passed, he left more than money. He left a purpose. He taught me that protection isn't just about building walls, but about giving people the resources to protect themselves." The interview was published in a Sunday edition and had a bigger impact than Madison expected. In the following 2 weeks, the foundation received 140 requests for help. Women of all ages, all social classes, all with similar stories. Marriages that started well and ended in abuse. Fortunes that were squandered by manipulative husbands. Children used as bargaining chips. Women who found themselves without support, without resources, without hope. The Foundation's team worked tirelessly. Madison personally participated in the most complex cases, using her own experience to guide the strategies. She knew exactly how men like Ryan thought, how they acted, what tactics they used, and she taught other women to anticipate, to document, to protect themselves. A year after the Foundation began operations, Madison was invited to give a lecture at the NYU School of Law auditorium. The topic was Asset Protection and Female Autonomy. Helen was in the audience, as were Mrs. Rodriguez, Carla, and more than 300 people, mostly women. Madison took the stage wearing a red suit, her hair down, her posture confident. The twins were backstage with a nanny, but she knew they were fine, everything was fine. Good evening, everyone. My name is Madison Carter, and I'm here to tell a story. Not just my story, but the story of thousands of women who go through what I went through. For 45 minutes, Madison shared her journey. She spoke about her marriage to Ryan, about being thrown out in the storm, about her father's videos, about reclaiming the townhouse, about the court battle. But mostly she spoke about the importance of documenting everything, of building support networks, of never believing that being alone means being helpless. My father taught me that information is power, documents are protection, and solidarity is the strongest weapon we have. If you're in a relationship and you feel something is wrong, document it. Take pictures, save messages, record conversations when legally possible. If you have access to financial documents, make copies. If you have friends, family, people you trust, don't isolate yourself. Men like my ex-husband thrive in silence and loneliness. Don't give them that power. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Several women were crying. After the lecture, Madison was approached by dozens of people wanting to thank her, to share their own stories, to ask how they could help the foundation. It was that night, on the way home with Helen and Mrs. Rodriguez, that Madison felt for the first time that she had truly overcome the trauma. It wasn't that she had forgotten. She would never forget the pain of her C-section stitches as she walked in the rain, never forget the humiliation of being called dead weight. But that pain no longer defined her. She had transformed it into purpose. 3 months after that lecture, on a Thursday afternoon, the Foundation's secretary informed Madison that a man wanted to speak with her personally. No appointment, insisting it was urgent. Madison was about to refuse when the secretary said his name, Ryan Anderson. Madison froze for a moment. It had been over a year since she had seen Ryan. He had shown up for only 2 of the supervised visits with the twins, always seeming uncomfortable and rushed. For the last 6 scheduled visits, he simply hadn't appeared. She had moved on, created a life where he was just a distant figure, a past mistake that no longer held relevance. "You can send him in," Madison finally said, straightening her posture, "but ask Carla to stay in the room as well." Ryan entered, and Madison almost didn't recognize him. The man who was once vain and impeccable was now wearing faded jeans, a wrinkled shirt, and had an unshaven face. He had lost weight, and there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "Madison," he said, his voice hoarse, "thank you for seeing me." Madison didn't reply, just gestured for him to sit. Carla stood beside her, discreet but attentive. "What do you want, Ryan?" Ryan looked down at his hands, as if he didn't know where to begin. "I came to say that I'm formally relinquishing my parental rights. I know I haven't been a present father. I know I don't deserve to have any relationship with Liam and Luna. And I think it would be better for them if I just got out of their lives completely." Madison studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, of another game. But all she saw was a defeated man. "Why now? What changed?" Ryan laughed, but it was a joyless laugh. "Everything changed. Jessica left me. When the money ran out. The overseas accounts were frozen because you reported them. I lost the apartment I was renting. I'm living with a cousin working as a store manager, and I realized I have nothing. Nothing I thought I had was mine. It never was. So you want to give up on the children because your life isn't what you wanted it to be?" Madison asked, her voice cold. "I want to give up because it would be better for them not to have a father like me," Ryan replied, finally looking her in the eye. "I don't know how to be a father. I never did. I never wanted to learn, and they deserve more than I can give. Madison stood up, walked to the window. Outside, New York City was bustling, millions of people living their lives, facing their own dramas. She thought of the twins, now a year and a half old, starting to say their first words, to take their first steps. They were perfect, full of life, joy, and possibilities. "No," Madison said, turning to face Ryan. He looked confused. "No, I don't accept your relinquishment. You don't get the easy way. Out! You're not just going to disappear and absolve yourself of all responsibility. You are their father, and you will continue to be, with all the obligations that entails." Ryan opened his mouth to protest, but Madison continued. "You will resume the supervised visits. You will go to therapy for real this time. You will pay child support, even if it's a symbolic amount proportional to what you earn. And you will show up in their lives, not when it's convenient for you, but when they need you, because you know what, Ryan, I will not let my children grow up thinking they were abandoned, that they weren't worthy of their father's love. They will have a father present, even if he's an imperfect one, and you are going to learn to be that father." "But I don't know how." "Then learn," Madison interrupted. "You have resources, you're intelligent, you're capable. Use all of that to be better. Not for you, but for Liam and Luna. They didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to have complicated parents. But they deserve to have parents who try, and you are going to try." Ryan was silent for a long moment. Madison could see the conflict on his face, the part that wanted to run fighting against the part that, perhaps for the first time, was truly listening. "What if I fail?" he finally asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Then you'll have to try again," Madison replied. "Failing is part of it. What's not part of it is giving up without even really trying." Ryan nodded slowly. He stood up, extended his hand to Madison. She shook it firmly, looking him straight in the eye. "Thank you," Ryan said. "I don't know if I deserve this chance, but I'm going to try to take it." After he left, Carla approached Madison. "Are you sure about what you did, giving him another chance?" Madison smiled. "I didn't give it to him. I gave it to my children. The chance to know a father who might, just might, be able to become a better version of himself." The following months proved Madison had made the right choice. Ryan started attending the visits regularly. At first he was clumsy, clearly uncomfortable, not knowing how to interact with such young children. But slowly he began to improve. He brought toys, learned to change diapers, read stories with funny voices that made the twins laugh. The foundation continued to grow. 2 years after its launch, it had already helped over 800 women. Some managed to reclaim stolen assets, others escaped abusive relationships, and still others learned new professions and rebuilt their lives from scratch. The success rate was impressive, and the model began to be replicated in other cities. Madison never remarried. There were a few relationships, some interesting men who crossed her path, but she didn't feel the need for a partner to be complete. The twins, the foundation, Mrs. Rodriguez, Helen, the women she helped, all of it filled her life in ways she had never imagined possible. On the twins' 3rd birthday, Madison hosted a dinner at the townhouse. Helen was there with her husband, Carla with her wife, Mrs. Rodriguez with the new boyfriend she'd met at a seniors' dance, and some of the women the foundation had helped, all now close friends. And to everyone's surprise, Ryan was there too, shy and clearly out of place, but making a genuine effort to participate. After dinner, after the guests had left and the twins were asleep, Madison went up to their room. Liam was sleeping on his back, arms outstretched, completely relaxed. Luna was curled up in a blanket, holding her teddy bear. Madison tucked them in, kissed each of them on the forehead, and stood there for a moment, just watching. "Dad," she whispered, looking at the sky through the window. "We did it. Your grandchildren are safe, happy, loved, and I'm okay. More than okay. I'm whole." She left the room quietly and went to the office that had been Walter's, now transformed into her own workspace. On the wall was a framed photo of her father, smiling in that shy way that was uniquely his. Next to the photo, a phrase Madison had engraved on a bronze plaque. "True protection is not hiding from danger, but building a fortress so solid that the betrayal of others becomes irrelevant. Madison smiled, touched her father's photo fondly, and went back to the living room. There were foundation reports to review, new cases to study, women to help. Her life had purpose. It had meaning. It had love. And for the first time since that terrible night of rain and pain, Madison Carter was at peace. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Madison Carter has touched your hearts deeply. This narrative of overcoming, strategy, and love teaches us that even in the darkest moments, when all seems lost, there is still hope. Madison transformed her greatest pain into her greatest purpose, showing us that true strength comes not from revenge, but from the ability to rebuild and help others do the same. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, where every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, the twists of fate, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Hit the like button on this video so that more people can discover Madison's inspiring journey. And in the comments, tell us your thoughts, share your own experiences, or simply leave a kind word. Your participation keeps this community of people who believe in the transformative power of stories alive. Don't miss our upcoming content, where we continue to explore stories of resilience, justice, and love. Until the next story, and may each of you find the strength to write your own happy ending.